Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Lunar Alchemy. My name is John. I'm here, of course, with Bella, and we are going to be talking today about the solar transit through gate 56, the archetype of the comedian, and the elements of fire on the mountain. Of course, Gene Key 56 carries us from the shadow of distraction to the city of intoxication, my absolute favorite, because that's my pearl. And it is the way of enrichment. So the gift of enrichment, an extraordinarily powerful gene key. It is one of the 3 stop codons. So it does not code for amino acids. It is actually one of the ones that concludes the process of coding, and has also special significance to our current moment of humanity's evolution, in that it directly follows the 55th gene key. So it does give us a bit of a peek into where it is humanity may be headed once we fully integrated this upcoming transformation. So we're having lots of comments from everybody that's joined us. Thank you for joining us live. From everyone who are saying, goodness, these energies are powerful. Bella, please share with us your perspective. What's going on? Why does it feel so, I don't even know how to characterize it today, but you know, what's happening right now in the universe and in our individual experiences?
I feel that maybe we want to look at transits, although people might watch this later, but it just feels like today is one of those days where actually, for all of us, it feels like we're influenced by the transits. So I'm gonna
do it up.
Okay, share. So this is the neutrino weather right now. And what I'm looking at, or what I'm drawn to, you see, this is very powerful, and it's going to be even more intense. But now, because today we are kind of getting a taste of it, because the moon is moving through this conjunction of Mars and Uranus in the North Node. So this is the collective trajectory where we are in Taurus. It has to do with our self-worth, with our physical body, with the earth, and having Uranus there in gate 2, that's kind of unexpectedly shaking everything up. And what's happening is that Mars, which takes 2 years to go around the wheel, so it's not all the time. So Mars is coming in, and Mars has a lot of energy and a lot of action. So he's coming in to this conjunction. And on August 1st, that's when we have them in Gene Key 2.6. We're going to have all 3 of them. But what I feel is that today, because the moon is there, we get this like kind of emotional and also pull, because the moon is the tide. So it's kind of pulling on us to say, okay, or poking on us. Are you feeling this? Are you ready? How receptive are you? Second gene key. And also because we have that right now, the 24 and the 23, where it's like still there. It's asking us, you know, what are the things that you're going over and over and over that are not allowing your silence? Or where is it that you're listening to outside authority instead of inner knowing? And then, of course, in the middle right now. So as we're speaking, we are having the moon in 2.2. So over the next few hours, it's going to come exactly conjunct Uranus. And usually the moon is super happy in Taurus. She's exalted, she's happy. She's like, oh, you know, it's all about the senses, and she just feels home. And now she's not that happy, because Uranus has this unexpected energy kind of that just kind of explodes. She's like, I don't feel as safe as I usually do here. And that's been for a long time now. Every time she comes back to Taurus, she has to meet with Uranus instead of just feeling the central energy. So the moon is not super happy. And then even with the energy of Mars that she just went past, and later tonight she's going to also move towards the North Node. I feel that by tonight, and depending on where you are in Australia, of course, is already tomorrow, but if you're in the US and late, like kind of, you know, late night before it becomes morning in Europe, you might actually feel kind of, if you listen careful to your emotions and you like what's moving in your astral body, you might be able to feel into both your own trajectory direction, like where you're headed, and more like having a sense as a collective or as your community, and like, you know, then kind of the rings on the water out on where we're going. I would say two things. I believe that it's very important to simplify, and that's connected to the sun. So bringing in the 26th here, I believe that the enrichment that comes from the simple is where we're asked to focus right now. So we have the sun here, and it's going from Cancer, how we nurture, into Leo, how we lead, how we are that comedian, how we are telling our story, how we're living our leadership, and how we have that enrichment or that fun, you know, the creativity that we have in Leo. So how can we simplify in Taurus so that we can step up in that kind of, very much it's a square, so it's like a tension between also this, like how do you nurture, and how are you stepping up as a leader. So that's the one thing. This coming back to the simple. And the other thing, I believe, with Mars energy coming in here, it can be very uncomfortable to kind of just sit and wait it out. So I actually feel like Mars is asking us to move. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's Leo and Mars here are saying, you know, just do something. It might not be perfect, but if you kind of focus on the simple, there are some things that might want to move in the energy. And then at least like some of that pressure, some of that energy that's building can feel more like it's releasing. So dare to use your energy. And if you just sit and kind of feel into the past, I don't think that the past is going to give you the answers now. A lot is pointing towards where we're going, and that's where the energy lies. So feeling into where you're going and starting to take those steps. And Mars too, he doesn't think too much before he acts. So he's kind of asking us to tune into that possibility of enrichment, possibility of leadership, possibility of a simplification that's going to take us to life, to a way of living that is more enriching for us.
So as you're speaking, I'm feeling this energy very deeply in my body, and I want to put it in context of lunar alchemy, because all these planets are constantly moving. All of these, even the moon itself, like it's only going to be here for a couple hours. So like, okay, great. I'm going to do this for this afternoon. What's going on here? The moon is the reflector for that which is yet not integrated into our wholeness. That's why we have the sun, the moon, and the earth as the primary aspects of lunar alchemy. The trinity of our alchemy is the soul, the spirit, and the body. And we have these represented in these three cosmic bodies. And so as we come into this archetype of the comedian, as the moon is moving through this spot right where it is, it's grabbing this intensity of that which is yet not integrated. And when you speak about Mars having that pressure to take action, what that's going to result in is straight up distraction is going to manifest from within and without around us. And to some extent, I often feel that no matter where each of us as an individual is on our evolutionary journey, maybe we feel like, oh, I've totally integrated my shadow and I'm living the gift frequencies, and that's what I'm feeling. The impact of the collective on our individual experience is still going to be very, very strong in relationship to these cosmic forces. And so if you feel that you've been able to really move through this shadow of distraction, the moon is pulling us into this position to say, yes, but you are one individual that is a part of this whole. And in order for this whole to become truly whole, You've got to process through you these lower frequencies. And in my body today, I've been feeling this intense pressure of taking action that manifests as distracted energy, of saying, ooh, I need to do this, I need to show up for that. I was on a call with a woman today who was just getting to sharing the crux of her health journey, the thing that has touched her most deeply in her family. And in that moment, all I could think about was the fact that I hadn't yet put on paper the transmission for today. And I was antsy in my body. My energy was uptight, and I wasn't fully present listening. Not only that, the connection was poor. So she was popping in and out of this connection. So things of this nature. And while that was happening, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so distracted right now. And in that moment, the transmission fully manifested in my body. So in terms of moving with this energy, when Bella is saying, can you be present with the experience that is occurring inside of us? There's a lot of pressure for us to be distracted and the opposite of being present with what is happening. And those distractions happen on such a subtle layer. They take the form of the reality being the way that we believe it to be. Lunar Alchemy is at 4 o'clock. I have to be ready at 4 o'clock, because if there's no transmission, how am I going to put it down on paper and be ready by the time it's there? It's not going to happen. But that isn't the truth. The truth of reality is that it's quantum. And it may only take me 1 minute, which it did, to get that, what was needed in preparation on paper. And so once I had that realization, I became present again for the conversation and the sharing that was occurring in my experience. And I was able to connect to the enrichment of that interaction, which related deeply to my own personal experience with the death of my mother last year, and why am I engaged in the work that I do in the world, and having another opportunity to share that in a vulnerable way with another human being who desires to receive that sharing. These are processes of going through this, and our perspective is going to be constantly shifting because of these cosmic forces. And everything that Bella shared is this incredible snapshot of what is happening in this envelope that is bringing so much possibility for awareness around this archetype of the comedian, what it means to work through us. How can we embrace the humor of a situation? Here I am. Here I am listening to a woman pouring her heart about how to manifest a download of a transmission to deal with the shadow of distraction. And what is distracting me from being present with that woman? That need that I have to get that transmission through me on paper. I mean, if that's not an ironic joke, I don't know what is. So, Bella, I'd love to bring you in. I see there's lots of comedic discussion happening in the chat, and I don't know if you had some more you wish to say about those things, or if you want to go in a different direction. But for me, I'm like, take it away. It's your stage, it's your show.
No, I definitely feel, the comedian. I know that we were speaking about the name as well, because it feels almost like there's something going on stage, and that's not the real thing. And that would mean that the archetype in a way is playing a game instead of being itself. And when you were speaking, what I was writing in the chat as well, the comedy of life, and that life is the stage. And it's not like when you come here and you're on camera, that is what the comedian is preparing for. He's in every moment is walking life, and he is enriched. And I like to go back to the circuitry as usual. And here we are on the abstract side of the connection between the throat and the ajna. So the 11 is going to have a lot of ideas, and some of them are very abstract, and some of them include demons, and some include diamonds probably, and some include the angels. It has like the darkest archetypes and the angelic and the lightest archetypes. It is that the shadow of obscurity in the city of light, and then life in between. And what I really would say when it comes to the 56, it's like the 56 is kind of responsible for the embodiment of some of those archetypes. So it's going to come in and say, okay, this is the archetype that we're going to feel into today. This is the archetype, the energy, the quality that's going to enrich our life today, our stage today. And I like that provocation that we have. And here we have another gate that is on that cusp. So when the 39, for example, is the provocation that we have in the Cancer energy that says, like, I'm going to provoke, I'm going to poke for love. Everything, anything is worth it for love. And here we have this cusp between Cancer coming into Leo. And it's taking the stage. And it's taking the stage in a, I would say, this is the sun that is the ruler of Leo. So it's definitely a more masculine energy. It's an empowered energy. It's a leadership energy. And at the same time, it still has a connection to everything that came before in the wheel. And I feel like it's, again, the simplicity, we see it where we are in the transits now, but always kind of coming back to that. It's not the more complex things that are going to enrich our life more. And I think somewhere in the Gene Keys, Richard says, enrichment is never about adding, how is it say? Enrichment is not about doing more. It's always about doing something less, something like that, but in a more poetic way. And that actually is really cool. And it goes back to the simplicity.
Mm. Mm. One of the things that I notice about the comedian is that this role as the entertainer within this gene key spectrum of frequency only begins to show up at the higher level of frequencies. At the lower level of frequencies, we have the comedian showing up as a spin artist or some form of a salesperson, an influencer who is using their stage for personal benefit. And the comedian comes in when there's this opportunity to bring people together, to increase the frequency of the collective's experience, to bring laughter, for instance, to experiences of suffering. And today we can see where we are simply by listening to the types of jokes that most comedians tell. Most of them are about painful subjects. Occasionally, a comedian kind of busts out on something that is funny, not because it's painful, but simply because everybody understands the humor of it, the unexpectedness of it, the freshness of it, and it makes everybody laugh. But frequently comedians today are telling jokes about what's funny about suffering. And in a way, this is a role modeling of experiencing enrichment through those demons, the lower frequencies that we have access to. And last night, I had some extraordinarily disturbing dreams where my consciousness was I wasn't making conscious choices in the dream, but I was experiencing what was happening. And I was in a body that wasn't necessarily mine. It was just a human being making some pretty horrendous choices. And inhumane, awful choices, at the extreme degree of what we've seen occur in humanity at the most horrific level. And in that dream, I got to experience the mindset of a person, or at least my own version of what a person might be experiencing as they are going through that process of making choices. And what I discovered was that this shadow of distraction, the reason for these horrific, inhumane choices, comes up because the need to be distracted from the pain that is underlying everything. That pain is so deep and so great that the only thing that can distract a person with this depth of pain inside from facing that pain are these horrific acts to turn it outwards and inflict it onto the environment around them. And what was interesting was in the astral plane, what you're able to interact with is not based on the manifestation of physical consequences of your choices. What you interact with are the consequences of your thought choices. What are the thoughts that are driving your reality creation? And so from the perspective of this being that I was getting this inside look through, the inhumane and horrific choices didn't have horrific manifestations. They actually had fairly positive-ish outcomes. And I was able to witness that, and then also allowed to have my mind shift to the awareness of what the physical consequences would be with those choices, and see the juxtaposition of those two things. And it really, what it made me think of is the shadow of psychosis and Gene Key's 61. Because each of us is living within our own little bubble of reality creation. And we go about in the world believing that our reality is the reality. And as a result of that, as long as we are in a process of requiring distraction to feel safe from the depth of our own fear or the depth of our own pain, we can never actually take on the role of a comedian. It's not really truly possible. The comedian can only function from this sort of higher perspective that can look at this form of suffering and find the joy and the humor in it, the kind of ridiculous joke that is behind it. And to me, I believe that kind of points at the cosmic joke of reality as it's described sometimes in the Gene Keys and in many other places. But that was kind of how I ended up experiencing these energies. And I kind of woke up with this idea of like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how deeply this shadow frequency impacts humanity, and kind of how dire it is in a particular type of way, because it allowed me to recognize that the murderers and the rapists and the abusers and the people who are doing these horrific acts, on a certain way of understanding, they're not really any different from a person like myself when I'm distracted by whatever I get distracted by. I'm still, when I'm in distraction, I'm still not willing to face that fear, to discover the humor that's underneath it or behind it. And I had never come into that experience of commonality with the lowest frequency levels of humanity as it's manifested today. And that was a really, I don't know how to describe it. It just, I feel like I'm still integrating it, frankly, and that's why I'm talking about it. But Bella, I'd love to invite you into this direction or any other that you feel inspired to take this topic. Oh my gosh, Jennifer says, welcome to my world.
I almost feel like I want to go to the shadow or the distraction, because this is part of the codon ring of trials, and it's one of our biggest, I would say, challenge in the world as it is. Not to say that our dreams are distractions, but there is something here with that, where I feel like asking ourselves, because I will even feel that that's what we see in the ring of trials, that even what can look like something positive can actually be something that keeps us away from really the truth and the essence, like we see in the 12. You know, when we feel like we are helping others to become more spiritual, that's often just keeping us away from really receive what's there for us. And yeah, what I feel into here are those kind of positive distractions that we have. I mean, I could even say like working out. I work out every single morning, and sometimes I think it's a kind of distraction, and it all often makes me kind of become later on in the day in Europe, and it makes things more complicated. And I'm like, no, now it's already 4 p.m. Like, I'll do it another day. And then it actually goes so far. So it's 3 years. I have some insurance cases that I did that for 3 years in a row, and now it's too late. So it's like a little bit of distraction to kind of push things forward. And that's what I feel what we were speaking about before, with where we are aligning now with the trajectory within North Node with Uranus there. It kind of feels like it's going to shake, you know, the more that we are actually in the shadow of the 33, the 12, and the 56, which are those 3 gene keys in the coding of trials. I feel like it could kind of be a shock, and it could come through dreams. It could come through where the things that we need to look at, that we are so good at not looking at because we're helping somebody else, or we are distracting ourselves, or somehow we are engaged in some kind of storytelling, which we have in the 12, throat gate. We have in the 33, which is the storyteller of all the experiences, and the 56, also throat gate. So what story are you telling that's actually in a way distracting you from coming back to the essence and evolving and stepping into the truth in the future?
Beautiful. I love when any discussion of this gene key leads to the storyteller. And that kind of leads me to ask Bella if we might just talk about the elements a little bit, and maybe bring up the I Ching aspect of this hexagram. With fire on the mountain, the I Ching refers to this as the wanderer. And it has to do with the fleeting nature that fire has on a mountain. A fire moves to consume. It moves quickly to consume any available fuel. But on a mountaintop, it doesn't last very long. It kind of flashes up, flares up, and then it disappears. So I wonder, Bella, if you would guide us through this, and kind of how you see it relating to our discussion thus far in this archetype, and how is this kind of like, what is this fire blazing atop the mountain all about?
Yeah, I still feel that the mountain is who, like kind of the body, our body here, and the background is the fire. So it's, again, how can you keep stable and still when everything is moving around? That's really what's asked here for me. And then, so what we see from a gene key perspective, because we're using the elemental trigrams. So we have the 52 on the bottom and we have the 30 on the top. And that's what you can see here in the braid as well. So fire over mountain, or 30 over 52. So distraction is this desiring stress. And that's what I feel like there's almost like something that's adding and adding. And with Uranus and what's happening in the transits, I feel like the explosion is not far away. And then enrichment is lightness with restraint, or lightness and balance, I guess we could say too. And that's, I guess that's the pathway of this gene key: lightness and balance. Like how lightly can you hold that dream that you had tonight, John? How lightly can you hold that episode of agitation, as you're like, what about the stage and being prepared for that? And now this woman, like, yeah, how lightly can you hold it? And how are you keeping your core stability in that mountain? And then again here, the city, the rapture of stillness, yeah, that's the highest expression, and that's the true flavor of this gene key. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I love how what this kind of brings to mind is what is often referred to as like spiritual fire. When we look at people who are on a spiritual path, many of those paths, when there has been a true spiritual master leading that exploration, it has often been shared that it is the inner fire that brings you into connection with grace. Kelly says, isn't everyone on a spiritual path? Well, that may be true. I'm talking about the self-identification that we create through our incarnated form and ego structure. And when people begin on that path, there is this connection to the longing for the divine. And I was considering today how in this process of this pathway, that we can easily confuse our emotional experience with this form of longing, this inner spiritual flame that exists within. And I feel as if when we're looking at this distraction as desiring stress, in our modern day, everybody is like, oh, stress is the enemy. Nobody desires stress. But if we truly begin to examine our behaviors and our choices on an internal level, we can begin to recognize where that desire for stress rises up in us in different circumstances, in different conditions. And when we look at that as like, even as a religious symbol, how often has the flame on the mountain been used to describe the connection to the divine? Moses went up and found the burning bush. I mean, there's so many examples of this image. And when I think about enrichment and the lightness with restraint, it brings to mind immediately the comedian of not allowing oneself to be carried away by the suffering of this world, while being light about the suffering that we are not unwilling to face. We're totally willing to face face it, look it straight in the eyes. And yet there's a lightness. We can joke about it and find the humor. So, Bella, we talked about the comedian last year, and I'm finding that I love this title more and more, because all great comedians are also great storytellers. And that really, really brings it in for me, yeah, I love that. Grace is where grief and gratitude meet. And that, I would say, is also a perfect description of connecting with the gift of enrichment, of being able to access gratitude through experiences of grief. It's incredible.
Yeah,
so Bella,
I feel that there is
any...
something. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always been kind of against substitution. And kind of speaking, even some of our conversations, John, about nutrition and how we could substitute something for something else. And I guess like I'm kind of like more towards the pure side. So like it's more like everything or nothing kind of thing. So I'm not necessarily the person that likes to just the substitution of things. However, when I energetically feel into the comedian right now and the 56 gene key, I feel it's important to look at what you're like carrying with you or what your instruments are, because there might be a difference between, smoking different things. Like some things are more distracting and some things are more enriching. So it feels important to kind of look what you have with you. So what are those things that you're using on your stage, and how pure are they, I guess. And that's where also the 12 comes in and the 33 comes in, because are you using the tools and the things that are helping you remember who you are, or the things that are actually making you keep forgetting who you are in the 33? That just felt like important to say almost like that kind of check with ourselves. And I don't even know what that is called in English, but I know when I was doing like improv in Sweden, it's like whatever you call, there's a name for all the things that you have on stage that you can play with, the chair and the this and the that. And that's like, what do you have on that stage that you can play with? And what's the quality of that? And does that help you to convey in a pure sense your message, or is that actually doing the opposite?
Yeah, I think that what you're speaking to right now, Bella, is this quality of this gene key that for me, and I believe can be very easily misinterpreted. And I believe what you're talking about is the stop codon. I have the 56 as my pearl, so I have and 30 is my evolution sphere. So I have both the shadow of desire and the shadow of distraction. So like the 56 is like a double whammy for me, because it's all built into itself, and I've got the 52. So that's all in there too. And it brings up like the third line level of how much in the extreme is enough, and the role of the third line to gather that information to understand how far does an extreme go. And when the 56 is functioning properly through us, we reach a moment where we recognize that it's moving away from enrichment and into distraction. Is it bringing us closer to who we are, or is it causing us to forget ourselves more? And as we go through that process, perhaps of total experimentation, I'm a 6 line, so I am still noticing more and more ways that I'm experimenting with everything. And even though I'm up on the roof, so as we move through this gene key, part of the awareness is of honing in on how much is enough before the experience begins to change in nature of how we of how that's going to come through us. And to some extent, I believe that that points to a truth about the way that we transmute and metabolize the different frequencies that we come into contact with through our reality. You know, there's nothing that's wholly good. You know, if we go to the point where of goodness, where we've forgotten, we got a question for an example. I will get that. If we go to let me use it this way, because it has lots of negative baggage around it. Let's talk about alcohol for a second and the impact that it has on the human system. So most people, especially those on a spiritual path, tend to demonize alcohol 100%. They will say, you know, there's no amount of alcohol that's good for you. And that's like a universal truth. My personal experience was that I was able to engage with alcohol in different ways that allowed me to actually access hidden emotions that I wasn't yet mature enough to face with just my regular waking awareness. And in the processing of those emotions through the way that that substance impacted me, it allowed me to release some emotional energy that was otherwise restricted and constricted inside of me. Now, there's a therapeutic benefit to alcohol to myself at a certain stage on my evolutionary path. However, knowing when you've reached that therapeutic level and saying, okay, that's enough, we're done, and not going further to say, let's see how far this takes me. And having that emotional release turn into a downward spiral as it can, that's where we need to have that stop codon jump in and say, look, you've gone to the point of meeting yourself more deeply. Going further than this is going to cause you to forget who you truly are. Excuse me. And that's kind of how I see this, the way that this 56, and especially when we talk about, I love talking about alcohol with this one because it is the city of intoxication. And the question is, on a spiritual path, when does a human being cease seeking that alteration of consciousness through outer substances and connect with the inner divinity and become intoxicated by that instead? And I believe through the process of enrichment, that is a process of cultivating that experience. It's just a process of being in constant appreciation and gratitude for everything that shows up. So, yeah, the medicine or poison. And there's an old adage about medicine and poison that suggests that every medicine is a poison if you take the right dose, and actually vice versa. Every poison is a medicine if you have it in the right dose. You know, there are arsenic pools that you can, like hot springs, arsenic hot springs, and those can be extraordinarily therapeutic for you to immerse yourself in, as long as you do it for the right period of time, that you don't absorb too much. So otherwise, you know, arsenic is a powerful kill you poison style type thing. So
I would just say the last thing that maybe we didn't mention, you know, this is the gate of stimulation in human design. So there is definitely that aspect where the 56 is kind of experimenting to see what's ready to open, what's ready to change, you know, what's ready to evolve, I guess. It's like experimenting for some kind of transition. And that is the transition of that codon ring, I would say, when we transition from the low frequency to the high frequency, where we remember who we are, and that is what's being expressed. So the 56 is not afraid of failure. It actually kind of would like to come to Lunar Alchemy and be like, let's see, what's the transmission today? So it likes that experimentation, and it's actually how it stimulates the world in a way that I would say is a little bit lighter. And that's often what we can say about Leo. Leo is lighter than Cancer. So it's not going to poke and provoke, like kind of really in the emotional realm. It's more going to stimulate in the more Leo leadership realm, possibly. So that's just what I felt like I wanted to add, to kind of like feel like we have brought up different angles or perspectives with this archetype.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I feel like everything you share is always ties everything together. And our transmission today is going to be, of course, about that inner flame. These fire transmissions tend to be, I think, for whatever reason, less common than the water and earth transmissions, for instance. If you think about your body, we're mostly made of water and then the minerals of the earth. And there's not a lot of direct experience that we can have of fire inside of us. And so today it will be an inner flame transmission, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So I think if nothing else changes between now and next Monday, we'll be back at our regular time on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern for our next conversation. So I want to thank everyone for joining us, for your conversation in the chat and enriching our conversation with your presence. And we'll look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. I'm sending loving presence to each of you from my heart to yours. And for our members, we'll meet you in the transmission. Till next time, bye-bye for now.